Okay, so today we're diving into the life of Ratan Tata,
Ratan Tata.
a name pretty much everyone knows, especially in India. You think industry, you think Tata. But you know what's interesting to me? We often hear these stories of business titans, and you assume, oh, they were born with a silver spoon, right? Ratan Tata's life wasn't exactly like that. His parents separated when he was young, and he was actually raised by his grandmother.
It's true. And it's one of those details that might seem small at first, but when you think about it, being raised by his grandmother, Navajbai Tata, that must shaped his worldview in ways we can only guess at. It's a far cry from the typical image of a corporate heir, isn't it?
It really makes you wonder, what values did she instill? Did those early experiences, those years with his grandmother, did they, play a part in how he approached leadership later on?
Absolutely. I mean, you can draw a direct line from that unconventional upbringing to the resilience he showed throughout his career. But it goes deeper than just resilience, right? You have to think about the influence his grandmother, who was a significant figure in her own right, had on his understanding of family, of legacy, maybe even his sense of social responsibility. This wasn't just about taking over a company. This was about carrying something much bigger forward.
And then there's this other curveball, his education.
Yeah.
You wouldn't necessarily connect the dots. The guy who leads one of India's biggest conglomerates studied architecture at Cornell. It's not the usual path.
It's so interesting, isn't it? It speaks to a mind that's drawn to structure, to design. And in a way, isn't that what leading a massive organization like the Tata Group is all about? Creating a sort of architectural blueprint, but on an enormous scale.
Okay, so you've got this Ivy League architecture degree. You'd think, all right, time for that corner office. But that's not what happened.
No, not at all. Instead of stepping right into an executive role, you know what Ratan Tata did. He went to work on the shop floor at Tata Steel.
The shop floor. Why would he do that?
It was a deliberate choice. He wanted to learn the business from the ground up, connect with the people who were the backbone of the company.
Yeah.
That tells you a lot about his approach, I think.
Yeah, talk about a grounding experience.
Yeah.
To choose that, being in his position, that changes your perspective.
Completely. For Ratan Tata, it wasn't about theory. It was about understanding the company, the processes, the people from the inside out. And that kind of experience, that foundation, it served him well later on when he made those really bold moves that transformed the Tata Group. And, it's interesting when you look at the Tata Group's trajectory under his leadership, how it really went global.
Yeah, it wasn't just about being a big player in India anymore. It was about making a mark on the world stage.
Exactly. And a lot of that came down to those strategic acquisitions. He made some really bold moves going after companies that were practically household names in other parts of the world.
I remember when they bought Tetley Tea. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a British institution.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, wow, this is a big deal. Like, they're not messing around.
Right. Acquiring Tetley, that was huge. It instantly gave them a major presence in the global beverage market. But it was more than just tea. It was about recognizing those brands with deep roots and seeing their potential on a global scale.
And he wasn't afraid to go after those really iconic brands like Jaguar Land Rover. I mean, those are practically woven into the fabric of British culture.
Can you imagine the audacity? Acquiring not just one, but two of Britain's most prestigious car makers. It was a statement. That's Ratan Tata saying, we're here, we're a global force. And then there was Core Steel. I mean, that's a whole other level. They became a major player in the global steel industry practically overnight.
He clearly had this global vision, but there was also this other side to him, this commitment to India that really came through with the Tata Nano. That whole idea of creating an affordable car for the masses. That was a whole different kind of ambition.
The Nano wasn't just a car. It was about social mobility, giving people opportunities they might not have had otherwise. And the engineering that went into it, I mean, trying to build a car at that price point, that's incredibly challenging.
Yeah, it was completely different from the luxury car market that he was also competing in with Jaguar and Land Rover. What kind of impact do you think the Nano project had overall? I mean, both in India and on Tata's image.
Well, it definitely got people talking, not just in India, but internationally too. It captured this idea of innovation and making things accessible that were once out of reach. And while the car itself, faced some challenges in the market, it really solidified Tata's reputation as this leader who wasn't afraid to take risks to try to solve big problems.
He wasn't afraid to shake things up.
Yeah.
And his leadership wasn't without its controversies, though. The whole situation with Cyrus Mistry, that was pretty intense.
Yeah, that whole thing with Cyrus Mistry being appointed chairman and then being removed, it was a big deal. Definitely brought up some questions about leadership, how transitions are handled at that level.
Absolutely. It was a very public situation, a lot of debate around corporate governance, the board's role, all of that. But I have to say, the part that I find even more interesting is what happened next. Ratan Tata stepping back in as interim chairman after that. Coming out of retirement to, I don't know, kind of steady the ship shows real dedication.
It really does. More than dedication, I'd say it's a deep sense of responsibility to the company, obviously, but even beyond that, to its legacy, its impact on India. It's more than just a business, right?
Exactly. And speaking of impact, we've got to talk about Tata's commitment to social good. His philanthropy is remarkable.
It is. And sometimes I think that gets a little lost, because his business achievements were so huge. But understanding his legacy, his philanthropy is a big part of that. Ratan Tata really believed in using his position to make a difference, a tangible difference.
He wasn't just like signing checks either. It was strategic.
Right. You see it with those donations to Cornell, Harvard Business School. Those weren't random choices. He was investing in education, in future leaders, in innovation.
Understanding that knowledge is power, in a way.
Exactly. And then you have the Tata Trusts, which, by the way, have been around for decades, doing incredible work in India. But under his leadership, their impact grew massively. That commitment to social good, it wasn't just him. It was about building something that would last.
It's amazing, to balance running this global empire with that dedication to giving back. There's one thing from what we read that I wanted to ask you about, actually. It mentioned that he personally invested in, like, over 30 startups. What do you make of that?
That's so interesting, isn't it? You've got this guy who achieved success on a scale that most people can't even imagine in these very traditional industries. But he never lost that spark of, like, the startup mentality, the belief in new ideas.
So even with the massive scale of Tata Group, he was drawn to that energy, that potential of something just starting out.
Yeah, maybe he saw a parallel there, The Tata Group, it started small once, more than a century ago. Maybe the startups resonated with him on that level. Who knows?
It's pretty inspiring. Makes you think, what can we learn from this guy? Not just about business, about life in general.
He definitely leaves us with a lot to think about. How do you balance ambition with compassion, tradition with a willingness to completely reinvent things? How do you build a legacy that's about more than just yourself?
About using whatever influence, whatever resources you have to leave the world a little better than you found it, just like he did.
Couldn't have said it better myself. A truly remarkable individual.